Good evening, everyone, online and offline. Welcome to Saturday Teachings at CKSL. And today, this is the third session on the series, the Middle Length Lamrim by Lama Tsongkhapa. And we have Venerable Gyalten Lekden with us. Thank you, Venerable, for being here to deliver us this teaching. And over to you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Just take a moment to settle into our space, to be very intentional. Whatever activities we've been doing all day, whatever running around we've been doing, whatever worldly excitement has occupied our mind today, let's put that all aside. Let's create for ourselves a very intentional, sacred space where we can study the teachings of the Buddha and we can learn how to put those teachings into practice. And now we set our motivation. So recognize that generate the mind that says the reason I'm here studying these teachings, studying how to live a meaningful life as the Buddha taught us, is not merely for my own benefit, not merely so I can find peace and contentment in my own life, so that I might be able to be a benefit to others in this and in all future lives. And I recognize that by taming my mind, by developing contentment and peace in my life, that is what enables me to have the greatest capacity to be of service of others. So therefore, I'll develop the mind of perfect enlightenment, and I'll work towards Buddhahood in order to be of service to other sentient beings. And that is the reason I'm choosing to engage in this study, in this practice, in this meditation here this evening. So with that motivation, very firm in your mind, we will offer some preliminary prayers. Would you like to answer? Okay.
Page number 24. Page number 34. Taking the seat from the book to the prayer.
I go for refuge and light to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment from friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment from friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment from friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. These remain unto the end of psychic existence, and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Short mandala of them. This brown anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Lamrim, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and I offer it. May all beings enjoy this pure manner. Seventy-two, 73. Praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, 1373. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the four destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, know the world, supreme guide of human beings, so became teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer of the Catholic man, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata and Lord of the world, supreme guide of human beings to became teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata and Lord of the world, supreme guide of human beings to became teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, secure from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When a spring amongst humans, you are born in this earth. You gaze down to the skies and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like golden mountain, faith that blazes in the three words, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With an plain science, face like spotless gold, colored like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the three worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having all compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like the vast ocean, to you, the one gone to justice, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy feel qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to this blind community of bending virtue I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage. to all worthy of respect, bound in bodies as many as all events and all aspects, suspend faith, agree, homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly in this, in the teaching of the Buddha, a star, a moon, a vision, a flame of lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, whether by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. The heart of the perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem, thus have I here one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Master Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha to the community of monks and the great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Piteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld the very then, through the power of the Buddha, Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of a lineage or daughter gain the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra said, O daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, to look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra likewise, phenomena of emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging, death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment, reliance upon the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, to be known as the truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. Just practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Here's the line page 13, page 81. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis in the three chakras, who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Chakadara Samaraya. Hey, Akasamarata Shadara Samaraya He Gate Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. I'm thinking of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth. May inner hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled. May they be pacified. Tintam Kuriya Swaha. May all negative forces be opposed. Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. All enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. And may and perfect happiness here right now. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So thank you for joining us, as I mentioned, on this Saturday evening class as we continue our study of the middle length Lamrim. As always, what's most important when we study a text, especially the way we're studying this text, trying to do a formal study, is that formal study means nothing if we don't integrate that study into our practice. Just improving our intellect isn't very helpful, right? So as we study, and as you study at home, and as you review on your own, we need to always bring what we study into our practice. Otherwise, just learning new facts about Dharma isn't great. It's not bad. Those are better facts than others to know, but we need to do something. So we need to constantly working to integrate what we study with our practice. And as soon as you say, well, this is something that I should be practicing and meditating, and this is something I should be studying, and you try to create this division, then you're always going about it backwards, right? And we've talked about that last week already, that we always have to be integrating all of those things. Our study, our practice, our meditation, all should be incorporated together all the time. Now, sometimes that's easier than others. Our first week, we just talked about how great a teacher is. So you say, well, how do I integrate that into my practice? But even that's useful because we say, well, why does Tsongkhapa start his text proclaiming the greatness of the teacher, right? So when you realize the reason of it, by proclaiming and showing all the great qualities of the teacher who wrote the root text that he is writing commentary on, then it's showing the respect for the lineage, it's showing how to develop faith, how to develop admiration, and how that can then propel you onto your path of practice, right? So whatever we study, we need to integrate it into our practice. So where we are right now is, in the beginning, we talked about the greatness of the teacher, which is to say a teacher. Specifically, Tsongkhapa is commenting on a teacher's lamp for the path to enlightenment, right? That's the root text that he is serving, that this text is a commentary on. So first we talked about the greatness of the teacher, and then we talked about the greatness of the text itself. Both the greatness of a teacher's text, and then the greatness of all the Buddhist teachings. And the most important part of the Buddhist teachings were that we talked about the 4 different types of excellence. But what were the 2 types of excellence? The first 2. Those are the most important 2. Do you remember what they are? I'm going to review you every class. That's what this class is like. So if anyone online, you're welcome to answer, or people in the temple with us. 2 most important things you need to remember about all the teachings of the Buddha.
Discipline.
I'm sorry?
Moral discipline.
That's for our practice. Yes, that's true. But as far as all the teachings of the Buddha, every word the Buddha taught, there are 2 primary qualities that we have to remember. The first is that they're all
non-contradictory.
Non-contradictory, right? That's the first one. That they're all non-contradictory. And then what's the second one?
Personal instructions.
They are to be considered as a personal
They are
instruction.
my personal instructions.
I think we have from a few different places. It has to be a personal instruction. So we have to, and you're saying bring them into your practice. It's the same idea, right? So Tsongkhapa explains 4 excellence qualities, but the first 2 are the ones that are universal, that everyone teaches, that we need to hold on to. That all the teachings of the Buddha are non-contradictory. Sometimes the words might be contradictory because he's teaching different students to meet their needs. But the aim of these teachings all aim towards Buddhahood. They all aim towards the elimination of all the suffering of all sentient beings. So there's no contradiction in any of the Buddhist teachings, even if some of them are provisional and some are ultimate, right? That's the first thing. But the second thing, which is really, really important for us, is that all the Buddhist teachings, and this means then all of the commentaries and all of our teachers' teachings as well, have to be taken as personal instruction. Every word the Buddha taught, he taught for us. Every word that's from Papa taught, he taught for me. He taught this to tame my mind, right? That's the attitude you have to have when you engage with these teachings. And we always have to, as contemporary practitioners, remember when we study this, whenever we hear the word, I listened to the teachings, that really means I studied the teachings, right? Because the word to in Tibetan and in Sanskrit as well, Shrava or Chipa in Tibetan means to hear. But at the time of the Buddha, the way you studied was by hearing oral teachings. So the idea of hearing teachings is literal. You should be hearing the teachings from your teacher or from whoever it may be that's offering those teachings. But also every act of studying is involved in the hearing of the teachings, right? So to hear and to study are the same thing in our 21st century context, when we have access to printed copies that they didn't have thousands of years ago, right? Or not even thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, they didn't have, at least not in great quantities. So those two qualities are the most important to remember. And then as we're talking about the importance or the excellent qualities of the text, we talked about how to read and study the text, and then how to explain. And that is where we ended last time, ending in that section, the proper way to read and study the text, which is to say what are the qualities of a proper student. And then what we're going to do very quickly today is what are the proper qualities of teaching the Dharma, what to look for in a teacher. And then that goes into how to properly rely on a guru. So that will be the main thing we talk about today. But before we get there, little review time. So last time we talked about, Tsongkhapa very clearly said, the first thing to properly listen to the Dharma, which means to study it on your own, as well as to attend the Dharma teaching. You have to avoid the 3 faults of a vessel and adopt the 6 discriminations. Right? So what are the 3 faults of a vessel we have to avoid? That's fine. This I say all the time, so we can know.
A vessel which is turned upside down.
Upside down is the first one. And so what does that mean? We don't want to be like an upside down vessel?
That means there's no reception, the non-receptive student.
So we have to not be, I'm listening to people online and in person. So if I'm looking around, I'm hearing all of you. As you said, we have to be open-minded. We can't be closed down. We have to be receptive to the teachings. Otherwise, there's no point, right? So that's the first one. We want to avoid being like an upside down vessel. Now, what's the second one? As Tsongkhapa taught it, what's the second one? So that's the third one.
Correct.
So a stained pot is the second one. So he said, even if that pot is right side up, if it gets filled with water, that water will be polluted if there's a stain in the pot. So in that same way, what does that mean for us?
Prejudices which are there in us.
No wrong motivation.
Right. Exactly. So we need to have proper motivation and avoid having prejudices or baggage that we bring into the teaching with us. So first we have to be open-minded and receptive, and then we have to have the proper motivation and avoid having any sort of prejudice or baggage, which also could mean not necessarily that this teaching is wrong. That could also include, I've already studied this, so I don't need to study it anymore. I already know everything there is to know about the three tools of refuge. Something like this, it may not be negative. It's not saying that there's anything wrong with that teaching, but it's still coming in there with a preconception, right? And then if we're not like an upside down pot, and then we're not like a pot that's stained, what's the last thing we need to avoid?
They're cracked.
A leaky pot that has a crack or a hole in it, which is to say, we need to be attentive, right? We need to remember and retain everything we study. So those are the 3 qualities of a pot that we need to abandon, or of a broken pot that we need to abandon. And then we need to adopt the 6 discriminations. But before we get to those, because we've only talked about 4 of them, before we get to those, we're studying the Lamrim drink, middle-length Lamrim. Tsongkhapa, we're taught that there are 5 major texts on emptiness that Tsongkhapa taught, and we should study all of them, right? What are those 5? In order.
The Lamrim Chenmo.
So Lamrim Chenmo, and that was written in 1402, the great stages of the path to enlightenment, right? That was written in 1402. And the next one, Essence of Eloquence, Drane Lekden Ningpo, that was written in 1407.
The middle length Lamrim.
That is, Drane Lekden Ningpo is also teaching the Chittamatra point of view as well. The Drane Lekden Ningpo teaches Chittamatra and Swatantrika Madhyamaka and Prasangika Madhyamaka all separately to show all 3 distinctions very, very clearly.
The middle length Lamrim, third one.
1 second. The Sanskrit term for the title, it's composed in Tibetan because it's on top of that composed it. So in Tibetan, it's Drane Lekden Ningpo. In English, It's like the essence of eloquence regarding the interpretive and definitive meaning. And then the third one?
Middle and
Ocean
Lamrim.
of reasoning.
No, not
Ocean of
middle length
reasoning.
Lamrim.
Middle of Ocean of Reasoning.
Ocean of
Ocean
reasoning.
of Reasoning. Ocean of Reasoning, which is a commentary on
Mula Madhyamika
Mula
Karika.
Madhyamika Karika.
Nagarjuna's.
Madhyamaka. What? Madhyamaka what?
Karika.
It's a
Mula
commentary.
Madhyamika Karika.
Exactly. A commentary on Mula Madhyamaka Karika, which is by Nagarjuna, right? The fundamentals of wisdom, we say. And then number 4 is the middle length Lamrim. That was composed in 1415, which is what we're studying now. It is sometimes called the small Lamrim or the small section on special insight, but it is also called the middle length Lamrim. And then the 5th one,
Illuminating the intent.
illuminating the intent, Gompa Rapsel in Tibetan. And this is composed in 1418. And this is Tsongkhapa's commentary on
Mula
the
Madhyamika
Madhyamaka
Avtara.
Avatara,
Chandrakirti.
which is written
Chandrakirti.
by Chandrakirti.
Chandrakirti.
And that itself is also the Madhyamaka Avatara is a commentary on Nagarjuna, right? So 2 of Tsongkhapa's texts are commenting on Nagarjuna, but one directly and one indirectly. And the reason we're taught to study these 5 is because Tsongkhapa taught emptiness in a more refined way each time across those between 1402 and 1418. So these are the 5 texts where he teaches emptiness, which is the heart of Buddhist philosophy, right? It's what we need to understand if we want to be truly free from suffering, is we have to understand emptiness. And he taught it in a more refined way each time. So by studying all 5 of these texts, then we are able to refine our understanding of it as we go through these texts, right? His Holiness has advised that we should study them all sequentially. And obviously we don't have to. You can study them in any way you want, but the more refined explanation is you're going to find in Gompa Rapso, or the more detail in illuminating the intent. And so then, for that reason, it's advised to do sequentially. Or just keep in mind, if you're not studying them sequentially, keep in mind where among these 5 it was taught, And now the Lamrim Chemo, so the great sages that path to Lamrim, and then the Lamrim Dring, the middle length, are both commentaries on Atisha's text, right? On Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, which Atisha composed in Tibet, right? Atisha was a Bengali master who was at the Vikramashala Monastery, and then he was invited to Tibet by the Lama Yeshe O and Jantup O, and he came in the 10th century, or end of the 9th, beginning of the 10th century, at their request. And the first thing he taught there was he composed and taught the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And once they sent a copy of that back to Vikramashala Monastery, the abbot there and the other scholars there said, oh, his time in Tibet is beneficial. This is a perfect text. Therefore, they stopped requesting him to come back to India, right? Because at first, he was only given permission to go to Tibet for a few years. He was supposed to come back to India. But then they said, it's okay, you can stay. Because clearly your time in Tibet is creating this such an important text. So that text is 68 verses long, right? And this is Tsongkhapa's middle length commentary. As we can see, this English is already quite long. The greater one is even longer. Now, the difference between the middle length and the greater one is just the amount of detail Tsongkhapa goes into and the amount of quotations he brings in, right? It's teaching the same thing. This one he taught in a more condensed way, as he said in his promise to compose, to make it easier to practice. Okay, so now that we've gone through our review session so far, now, as we mentioned, the place we're at now is the 4th of the 6 discriminations. After you've abandoned the 3 faults of a vessel, we need to adopt the 6 discriminations. So we're on page 15, on the bottom of 15. But before we get to that, what are the 6 discriminations that you adopt after you abandon the faults of a leaky vessel? The first discrimination here, I'll give you the first one, is of yourself as a patient or a sick person. Then
Buddha as a doctor. The Buddha as a doctor.
Exactly, the Buddha as the doctor.
And the medicine, Dharma as the medicine.
So the discrimination is you discriminate yourself as a sick person suffering in samsara. The Buddha as the doctor is the second. The Dharma is the medicine. And then the fourth one, it
should be taken continuously.
Continuously, right? So continuous, these are listed on page 13, but we're not going to look at them this because we've already reviewed it on our own, so we know it, right? So the fourth one is the continuous practice is the cure to our sickness, right? So we're a patient the Dharma is the medicine. We're a patient. The Buddha is the doctor. Dharma is the medicine. Continually practicing is how we take the cure. And those are all the things we discussed last week. So now we have two left to discuss. The fifth one is contemplate or develop the discrimination that all of the Tathagatas are exalted beings. And then generate the wish. So the last one isn't really a discrimination. It's a wish that the teachings and the tradition of the Dharma lasts for a long time. So these 6 things that we should generate when we go about receiving a teaching or studying, right? So not only do we abandon the 3 faults, but we adopt these 6 discriminations or these 6 attitudes. And the truth is, these are the kind of things we should be doing instinctively, right? So when we study these, whenever you pick up a Dharma text, you should have in the mind that I am sick. I have the sickness of samsara. I've been infected by samsara. But this is the medicine, right? Every time you pick up a text, no matter what it is, that should be in your mind, that this is what's going to cure me. This was taught by the great doctor, who is the Buddha. And therefore, if I continue to practice this, that is how I go about being free of sickness, right? The Buddhists themselves, who gave all these teachings, are excellent beings. And I wish that this teaching existed for a long time. Those should be the instinctual thoughts you have whenever you begin any sort of study, whether it's self-study, whether it's your morning meditation, right? Because when you meditate in the morning, even if you spend 15 minutes just doing calm abiding meditation, that is still a type of Dharma study, right? You're studying your mind. So you can always develop these. And right now, I know that I'm kind of giving you the runaround, asking you to list off doing this review. But the reason that we're studying this way is because eventually these should be instinctive. You shouldn't have to think about it, right? You should just get used to the fact that as a samsaric being, I recognize I'm suffering as a samsaric being. I don't want to suffer. These discriminations help free me from suffering. So the last 2, as I said, we're on the bottom of page 15 in our text. Hopefully everyone here has a PDF. The people that are with us online have a PDF. If not, it will be shared in the chat. And those who are here have a printed copy. So the 5th discrimination is we develop the discrimination that all of the Tathagatas, which is to say all the Buddhas, are exalted beings. So Kappa doesn't have a lot to say about this. He just says, after you have developed these first 4 discriminations, bring to mind that the teacher of the Dharma, the Bhagavan, is an exalted being, and therefore develop respect. So what is useful here is to think about the language. So a Tathagata is one who has gone to lessons, right? Which is to say, has perfectly realized the nature of reality without any obstacle or obscuration. And then a Bhagavan, we say a Bhagavan is an exalted being. So what do we mean by Bhagavan? Right? So we can look at both the Sanskrit and the Tibetan etymology of that and get some meaning. The Tibetans, so Bhagavan, in Sanskrit, van or vat, the suffix means to have, right? To be endowed with something. Bhaga is excellence, right? So the literal translation of Bhagavan that you see in some Tibetan early sutras is Lekden. I know, right? Nothing to live up to, right? But someone endowed with excellence, right? But so you see that on occasion. But the more common translation is Chom Den De. So Chom means to destroy. Den, again, means to be endowed. And De means to go beyond something. So what do these 2 etymologies mean? Well, first off, we say to be endowed with excellence. We generally say that it's referencing the 6 excellences or the 6 excellent qualities, right? To be endowed with the 6 excellent qualities, sometimes called the 6 fortunate qualities. So the first one is having marvelous sovereignty or excellent sovereignty. And that means that the Buddha or all of the Buddhas have totally defeated or totally overcome the 2 obscurations, the obscuration to liberation and the obscuration to omniscience. That's the first of the 6 excellent qualities of the Buddha that we think of when we hear the term Bhagavan. Then, in addition to marvelous sovereignty, they have marvelous form, which means that they have a body that is capable of showing the 32 major marks and the 8 minor signs of a Buddha or of a supreme emanation being. They have marvelous glory, or Shri, right? Shri, the term Shri in Sanskrit, marvelous glory. What we mean by that is they have perfect equanimity. That's what we mean by being glorious, is that they have perfect, not equanimity, equality, that they see all sentient beings without discrimination. Harmful sentient beings and helpful sentient beings, they love them all equally, they have compassion for them all equally, and they work for their benefit equally, right? So marvelous sovereignty, form or body, glory, and then popularity or fame, which is kind of self-explanatory, that their presence invites people to praise them, right? Just by their being in their presence. Then they have exalted wisdom, marvelous exalted wisdom. They are omniscient beings. And they have marvelous sundu, effort, which is to say their effort to benefit others it never diminishes, and it is not fabricated, right? It's unfabricated effort that is continuous. So these 6 qualities are what are all contained in the word Bhagavan, right? Someone who has these 6 excellent qualities. We also say Kyom, they've destroyed. What have they destroyed? They've destroyed the 4 Maras, right? They've destroyed these 4 demons, we could say, who are holding us back. These 4 demons, 3 of them are not external beings. There's the Mara of the afflictions. So all the afflicted minds. That's the first Mara. Then there is the Mara of the aggregates, right? The fact that we have a contaminated aggregates, which is to say the fact that we have samsaric bodies. That's the second Mara. There's the Mara of death, or the Lord of death. The fact that we are going to die. That is itself a type of Mara. And the last one is the Mara of the divine sun. This is a type of deity, or a malevolent deity that causes obstacles and harm that the Buddha has defeated, that we also try to defeat. So not only do they have these 6 excellent qualities, they have infinite excellent qualities, but these are the 6 that we talked about. They've defeated the 4 Maras. And then the Tibetans added the word de, gone beyond, because you see the term in Sanskrit, other religious traditions, the term Bhagavan is used, right? To denote other types of spiritual teachers. Different Hindu traditions have used it, and even contemporary people call Osho a Bhagavan. Like these, you know what I mean? People use this term indiscriminately, or not indiscriminately, but for their teachers. So the Tibetans said we need to set it apart. And so not only is it Bhagavan, but it's gone beyond. So Depa, usually we say means gone beyond samsara entirely, but here it's showing gone beyond all other Bhagavans, right? So that is what we mean by the term Bhagavan. So when we think of these teachings we're reading right now are coming from Tsongkhapa. They are based on a teacher's teachings. A teacher's teachings are based on the sutras, which are the words of the Buddha. So we follow that lineage back and realize that what we are studying right now isn't directly the words of the Buddha, but it is still the essence of the words of the Buddha. And therefore, it is the essence of the holy Dharma, which is the pure medicine or free us from samsara. And the person who spoke those words has all these qualities. Right? So whenever we sit down to practice or study, we should bring that to mind. Because the reason we do this is because it improves our ability to study. It improves our practice. Right? That's the reason we do it. And we're going to get into Guru devotion later today. But it's the same. The reason we develop Guru devotion isn't for the benefit of the object. It's for our benefit. Right? So the reason we think of all these excellent qualities of the Buddha isn't to benefit the Buddha or to benefit our teachers or to benefit Tsongkhapa. It's to benefit our minds, to make our study and our practice more meaningful and more firm, right? To make it more realized. So that is the 5th discrimination. And then the last discrimination is not really a discrimination, but it is the wish for the teachings to remain for a long time. Right? Think how nice it would be if, based on the listening to such a Dharma, the victor's teachings were to remain in the world for a long time. You know, part of this is also recognizing that we have a role to play in that. By me listening to this Dharma, or by me studying this Dharma, may that be one of the puzzle pieces that helps the Buddhist teachings remain for as long as samsara exists, right? So that puts us in the lineage or in the community of those who uphold the Dharma, right? So it makes us realize that we're part of this. We're not separate from it. We may not be great teachers like Tsongkhapa, right? Or a teacher, or any of the other great teachers that we look up to, but we're still part of this community that is upholding the Dharma, keeping it alive. And we don't have to keep it alive by broadcasting it, by teaching it to others. We keep it alive by our practice. That is what keeps it alive, at least for us. So that ends the section on to properly listen to the teachings, what you need to abandon and what you need to adopt. And then the next section, very briefly, is then the way in which, once you've done this, you actually listen to the teachings. So again, just to remind everyone, I will be reading the text as we go. This isn't a transmission, right? So I'm not offering a transmission here, but I am going to read through the text. That way we can go directly from Tsongkhapa's words. Apart from that, if you keep your own mind to one side while explaining or listening to the Dharma remaining separate from it, then this will result in whatever is being explained missing the point. Therefore, it is necessary to listen in order for your own continuum to reach certainty. To illustrate this, When you want to examine whether or not there is dirt or some other impurity on your face, you look at yourself in a mirror, and understanding that there is, you remove it. Likewise, when you hear the Dharma, your faulty behavior appears in the mirror of the Dharma, whereupon you feel anguish, thinking, this is what my mind has come to. Then, as you engage in eliminating faults and attaining qualities, you necessarily train in accordance with Dharma. It is like in the Garland of Birth stories, where the son of Sutasa asks Prince Chandra for Dharma teachings in these terms. Beholding the forms of my bad behavior in the dazzling mirror of the Dharma, anguish arises strongly in me, and I turn toward the Dharma. Knowing this to be the thinking of a suitable vessel for hearing the Dharma, the Bodhisattva gave him teachings. So this is saying, once we have adopted this kind of mindset, we've abandoned all of the obstacles to study, we've adopted the right type of discrimination. How do we go about listening? We recognize the Dharma is a mirror. The Dharma is showing us all of our own mistakes and is showing us how to then free ourselves of those mistakes. Okay? So we don't look at the Dharma, this is the important thing for me. We don't look at the Dharma as separate from my own practice. If we look at the Dharma remaining separate from me, then I'm missing the point, right? In short, thinking, I shall attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. To attain that, I need to train in all of its causes. Since apparently it is necessary to listen to the Dharma for that, I shall listen to the Dharma. And then you should generate the mind of enlightenment, consider the benefits of listening, and listen with joy, abandoning the faults of others. So that completes how to properly listen to the Dharma, which is really just saying, recognize what it means to be someone who is engaging in Dharma study, abandon all the obstacles, and adopt the right mindset that will make the most out of your study. And then, once you do that, generate a mind, proper motivation, and with that proper motivation, you engage in the study. So the next part we'll go over very quickly, how to properly explain the Dharma. And now, the reason this is useful for us is, even if you're not someone who's going to be teaching the Dharma, you should understand what it means to teach the Dharma, right? You should understand what you should be expecting of your teachers. And also, by understanding the proper way to explain the Dharma, it gives you more insight into what the Dharma itself is. You know what I mean? So this is useful, even if you don't have any plans on being a Dharma teacher. Because by knowing the proper way to teach the Dharma, you get more insight in how to receive it as well. So first, we consider the benefits of explaining the Dharma. The Treasury of Manifest Knowledge, so the Abhidharma Kosha, says, giving Dharma free of mental afflictions, teach according to Sutra and other true texts. In the auto commentary, it says, therefore, those who explain the Dharma incorrectly and with an afflicted mind that craves for material gain, respect, and fame, corrupt their own great merits. Therefore, a pure motivation to teach Dharma is extremely important, and in accordance with the Nargompa, who said, I have never explained the Dharma without meditating upon impermanence before the session. It is crucial to review it beforehand. You'll see many teachers, either before they sit on the throne or right after they sit on the throne, usually recite a verse themselves, and they often snap their fingers. Most often, what we're reciting is that verse that we all recited together at the end of the Praise of Shakyamuni Buddha, that verse that comes from the Vajrapada Sutra, like an illusion, a flame of a lamp or a bubble. This verse, that's the verse teaching impermanence, that's the verse really concentrating on how all compounded phenomena are impermanent. That verse is the one we usually recite. You usually snap your fingers, at least monks do, when they recite that verse. So you'll often see a teacher reciting that verse and other verses, because we're reminding ourselves, anyone that's giving any explanation of the Dharma, that I'm not doing this because I want popularity. And anything I may be receiving in terms of popularity or fame or even offerings or wealth, whatever, is impermanent. It doesn't last. It has no substantial value. And so if those are my motivations, then even if I explain the Dharma in the exact same way, it may benefit the students, but I am not benefiting me, right? I'm going down the wrong path. So when you ever have a Dharma conversation with a friend, which all of us will have, right? Whether we use those terms or not, with our friends and with our family, we have to say, why am I doing this? It's not because I want to show off how much I know, but it's because I want to help this other person and I have some understanding that may be harmful. That's the only reason we should share the Dharma with others, is to help them in some way. And now when we're talking to our Dharma siblings, so people that we know also practice the Dharma, then we'll use explicit Dharma language. But if we're talking to friends and family who may not be interested in the teachings of the Buddha, then we find other ways to use the Dharma to help them. without using Dharma language because that may not be useful to them. So we have to use worldly wisdom to determine how to help others. Sometimes it's explicitly Dharma talk, sometimes it isn't. But we should always check our motivation. Why am I doing this? In the exhortation to the extraordinary attitude, 2 groups of 20 advantages of giving the gift of Dharma in the absence of material things and concern for gain, respect, and the like are set forth. So in the Lamrim Chemo, these are all listed out, right? We won't go through all 40 of them here. That's the benefit of the Lamrim, the middle length Lamrim, is we don't go through all 40 of them. Also, in the questions of the Householder Sutra, the questions of Householder Ugra Sutra, it says that the merit of a householder giving immeasurable material things is exceeded by an ordained person giving a single verse of Dharma instruction. When uttering the mother of the Buddhas, so that finishes why the benefit to teach. Okay, I don't think that needs any comment there. That's pretty clear. Next is generating respect for the teacher and the teachings. So whenever we engage in studying the Dharma, we should have respect for the teacher. That's part of the reason that when you come to a Dharma center and there's a teaching happening, you should always do prostrations. Even if that person isn't your guru, then you do prostrations to the teaching from, because what they're doing is representing the teachings of the Buddha, right? So even if you don't see that particular teacher as your own guru, you still recognize that what they're doing is instructing you in the Dharma in some meaningful way. And therefore, you're paying respect to the teachings themselves, right? And again, it doesn't matter for me, right? I was talking to one of my classmates because this year especially, I've been coming here every weekend as opposed to once or twice a month. So my classmates are used to me disappearing for 2 days out of every 6. So my classmates joke to me and they say, "Oh, you must sit on a teaching throne, don't you?" And I say, "Yeah, of course I do." Because that's the whole point of teaching. I don't sit on the throne because I want to sit on the throne, but you sit on the throne because I'm representing the teachings of the Buddha, right? And therefore, to help instill faith, not in me, but in the teachings, it's important to sit like this. It's important to have an elevated seat, right? But your classmates and friends make fun of you for it, and that's okay, right? It's good. It's important because that helps you keep your ego in check, right? So we need to generate respect for the teacher and the teachings both. When uttering the mother of the Buddhas, so the mother of the Buddhas is all of the Prajnaparamita teachings, all the perfection and wisdom teachings, right? They're called the mother of Buddhas is because they're the teachings that most directly teach emptiness, and it's through direct realization of emptiness that we, when combined with Bodhicitta, become Buddhas. So they're often called the mother of Buddhas, the Yum, the mother teachings. When uttering the mother of Buddhas, the teacher himself arranged the seat and so on. Accordingly, since the Dharma is a field of veneration, even for Buddhas, one should bring to mind the positive qualities and kindness of the Dharma and its teacher and generate respect. So then when this is again for the teacher to do, right? This is saying this is what the teacher has to do. Before they teach, they should be generating respect for the teachings. That's part of the job of a teacher, is realizing that what you're teaching is the words of the Buddha. So it's saying when the Buddha himself taught the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the first thing he did was generated a mind of respect, realizing how powerful these teachings are. Not because they're his words, but because they're explaining the meaning of reality, right? So that is how powerful these teachings are. The teachings are so much more powerful and more important than the teacher, right? You know the 4 reliances? What are the 4 reliances? This isn't a review. We haven't talked about this. It's just to see if anyone knows it. There will be a review on this next week, just to keep in mind. So instead of relying on the teacher, we need to rely on the words of the teaching, right? Between those two, the words are more important than the teacher, which is to say, if there's a really popular teacher, that's not as important as what they're teaching, right? The teacher could be anyone if they're teaching the correct Dharma, right? So don't be swayed by having a popular teacher or a famous teacher, or even having someone who comes from an elevated background or some sort like this, right? It's not to say that we should have respect for the teacher, but the words are more important than the teacher. So between those two, we rely on the words, not the teacher. And then we rely on the meaning more than the words. That's the second reliance, right? So first we rely on the words more than the teacher. Then we rely on the meaning of the words as opposed to the words themselves. And then we rely on the definite meaning of the words as opposed to the provisional meaning of the words. And then lastly, we rely on experiential wisdom that understands that meaning more than the intellectual knowledge that understands that meaning. We can talk about these more later. I want to keep going, but I want you to remember those four because they're important. Remember, we rely on the words more than the teacher. We rely on the meaning more than the words. We rely on the definitive meaning more than the provisional meaning. And then we rely on the experiential wisdom that understands that meaning more than the intellectual knowledge that understands that meaning. That isn't to say that those other four that we don't rely on as much aren't important. The teacher is important. The provisional meaning is important. The words are important. Intellectual knowledge is important. But when compared to the other one is more important. You know what I mean? Right? So we'll have a test next week. Those four. If you have questions about them, we can talk about them later. But let's try to move a little bit faster than I usually move. So then the next section is then the attitude and the activity of teaching, what you should generate. So the sutra requested by Sabarmati puts forward 5 discriminations for the teacher. So very similar to the 6 discriminations of the student, there are 5 of the teacher. And there's generating the discrimination of oneself as the doctor, of the Dharma as medicine, of those listening as the patient. So those are the same, right? And then the 4th one, the Tathagata as a holy being. And then the mode of the Dharma for abiding a long time. So they're the same as the 6 for a student, except it's a little bit reversed that since you're teaching, you recognize yourself as the one who is the doctor. Now they're missing one. What is the one that's missing? Right? So the persistent practice as the cure. And the reason that's missing is because as the teacher, that is not the discrimination you need for the act of teaching, right? That's what you need to apply the teachings to your practice, right? So otherwise they're the exact same. It's the exact same motivation, the exact same mindset the student has, the teacher should be adopting. Like, not the exact same, right? There's a little bit switch, but it's the same point getting across. And then they add on, in addition to those 5, you should have the development of loving kindness toward the people around. So that's important. If you're going to be engaging in any sort of Dharma instruction or conversation, you should have a mind of loving kindness and compassion towards the people that you are teaching, right? You should never look down upon people you're teaching. When you're having a Dharma conversation, you should never be looking down upon. The whole point is to benefit others. And if you think that you're better than me because I have more Dharma knowledge than you, then that's not a mind that wants to benefit me. The envy, born from anxiety that others are superior, the laziness of putting things off, the discouragement of fatigue due to explaining things over and over again, praising oneself and chit-chatting about other people's faults, the reluctance to lend out texts, as well as the concern for material things such as food and clothing should all be abandoned. Thinking, those very merits from teaching for the sake of my own and others' enlightenment are the provisions of my happiness. Right? But I don't think that needs too much commentary. These are, as someone who's engaging in teaching, setting the proper motivation, making sure you're doing it, and saying that the act of merit from teaching, that is what is going to sustain you. If you're teaching for any reason other than that, then you have to readjust. So that's the motivation, the attitude. What are the actual activities of teaching? Having washed and dressed in immaculately clean clothes, in a clean and pleasant place, you should sit on a cushion on a Dharma throne. If you then chant the mantra for subjugating demons, the demons and gods of the demonic category will not come closer to you within a perimeter of 100 yojanas. Okay, it's good to know. That's part of the reason we recite the prayer to lion face Dakini, right? To help prevent obstacles. 1 yojana is about 4.5 miles. So that means you've got about a 450-mile radius. I don't know. The calculus is not the most interesting thing. It's the intention that's most interesting to me. But if the math matters for you, there you go. Even if they do come, they will not be able to create any obstacles. As it says in the sutra requested by Sabaramati, therefore, you should chant that mantra and, with an extremely radiant facial complexion, give your explanations conjoined with the conditions for ascertaining their meaning, examples, proofs, and quotations. Okay? So, you create a mind, you try to prevent you have a proper internal predisposition, you do your best to prevent external obstacles, and then you give the explanation, but not a dry explanation, an explanation that's combined with the proper things that students need. So different students need different things, right? Different students have different learning styles. So here, examples, proofs, and quotations are all designed to help everyone understand the Dharma more meaningfully. In Guna Prabha's Sutra on the Discipline, the Vinaya Sutra, it says, do not act without being asked to. Accordingly, you should not teach without having been asked, and even when someone asks, you should examine the vessel. However, knowing someone to be a suitable vessel, it is acceptable to teach even without having been asked, as it says in the King of Meditative Stabilization Sutra. Further modes of conduct are set forth in the Sutra on Discipline. Okay. So it doesn't go into more detail here, but it says, firstly, the 2 points here is, one, you generally shouldn't be giving a teaching without being requested, unless you're confident that the vessel is an appropriate vessel and it's an appropriate time to teach. In that case, it's okay. But you always have to make sure that you're teaching something appropriate to whoever is listening. That's what it means to be a vessel, right? To someone be receiving the teaching. And generally, it's better to be requested to teach instead of just teaching on your own. Then how to proceed at the end of a teaching. This has 4 points. First one is the actual thing to do. The roots of virtue of teaching and listening in this way should be sealed by means of a pure aspirational prayer, such as the prayer of good conduct, which is to say the King of Prayers. So we do a dedication at the end. And in the King of Prayers, there's 2 verses of dedication that are sometimes considered the best of dedication verses, but any dedication verses you can do. So that's the first thing you should do at the end of a teaching session is dedicate the merit. And then the benefit of doing this. There's no doubt that if the Dharma is explained and listened to in this manner, in just one session, the advantages stated above will arise. Due to the act of listening and explaining the Dharma hitting home, all the karmic obscurations accumulated previously by not respecting the Dharma, and those who expound it and so forth, are purified. And all the ones that are new, all the obscurations that have been newly accumulated are nipped in the bud, it says here. That means they are prevented from increasing, right? So by generating the right motivation, not only are you learning the Dharma and integrating into your practice, in the past year, any negative karma you've created with regard to the Dharma, whether by denigrating the Dharma or practicing it incorrectly or ignoring it, that is eliminated, right? Due to the manner of listening hitting home, the instructions set forth bring about benefit in the mind. Seeing this, all the earlier saints in general were diligent about this, and especially the former gurus of this instruction persevered in it with utmost diligence. These are evidently great instructions. If you do not reach certainty about this, and your attitude does not change, as is often the case, no matter how much the profound and vast Dharma is explained, you will become like a god fallen to the rank of a demon, and the very Dharma will become an aid to the afflictions. Therefore, since it is like the saying, if you err on the 1st of the month, you will do so until the 15th. The wise strive for this method of transforming what has been heard and explained into the path, and make every opportunity to explain and listen into something worthwhile. For this is the best preparation for teaching the instructions. So this is just reminding us that the Dharma is only beneficial to us if we listen to it with an open mind and try to practice it. You know, if we're just like a stone where nothing can saturate our mind, then it doesn't matter how many excellent Dharma teachings we listen to or we study if we don't do anything to actually practice them, right? This is both as someone explaining the Dharma or listening to the Dharma. Okay, so then now we're moving on to the root of the path, how to rely on a spiritual teacher. So this has 2 points. The somewhat elaborate explanation for how to generate certainty regarding a teacher, and then the condensed presentation of how to sustain the meditation of the guru. So the first one, the somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty, also has 2 points. The first is the need to rely on a spiritual teacher. So we've talked a lot about relying on a spiritual teacher. And I think, especially for Indians, that is something that is more instinctual. Understanding the importance of a guru is something that culturally many Indians have an understanding for. Not so in the West, right? Westerners have a respect for clergy, but not the same way that the Dharma expects us to. Now, we did a whole class a couple of months ago on the 50 verses of Guru devotion, right? As well as some Papa's commentary on it. So we've talked a lot about how to properly rely on a teacher here. So this, what we're going to do today, and that's taught in the middle and Lamrim, is a very condensed version of that. So for those who want a more extensive teaching on it, I'm sure those are all recorded on YouTube. And then if you want to study it on your own, Papa's commentary on the 50 verses of Guru devotion is called Fulfilling All Hopes, I think is what it's called in English. We have a copy in our library here. It is translated into English very beautifully by Gareth Sparrow, I believe. So that's something you can study on your own. But we did a whole series on that as well. So here, this is a more condensed version. So we can go through it with a little bit of quickness. he says, with good intention. As all goodness, starting from the development of a single positive quality and the decrease of a single fault in the mind of the disciple, has its root in the sublime friend, right from the beginning, the way to rely on him is important. It's important to recognize here, Tsongkhapa is commenting on, or this whole text, as well as the Lamrim Channel, are commentaries on Atisha's text. Atisha's text is first how to engage in Dharma practice, what motivates us to study the Dharma, to realize the Dharma, to practice it, and all the different levels of practice that we have to adopt that are shared in common with all the different types of Buddhist practitioners. Atisha does not talk about Guru devotion, right? So nowhere in Atisha's explanation of the path of practice is Guru devotion. So Tsongkhapa starts with it because he says before you can even be inspired to engage in Dharma practice, you have to rely on Atisha, right? So he's not criticizing Atisha's text, but he's just showing that if you want to begin your journey, Atisha starts with the first step of the journey. That's where Atisha's text starts. This is the first step you have to take. He's saying before you take that first step, you have to have a teacher. Now, that may not mean we may not all have gurus yet, especially people that are relatively new to the Dharma, have not formed a guru-disciple relationship. But you still have to understand the importance of a guru, and then anyone that is teaching the Dharma to you. Well, anyway, we'll get to that as we go on. That is an important first step for us to progress in the path, right? Now, you shouldn't take a guru willy-nilly. We know that relationship to a guru is something that lasts for the rest of your life. Once you accept someone as a guru, they're your guru for the rest of your life, not their life, your life, right? So that's something that's very important to uphold, especially in a Mahayana context and especially in a Tantric context. And those two get blurred sometimes. So you shouldn't just, when someone says something that sounds nice to you, you shouldn't be like, oh, they're my teacher, right? We have to investigate them. But it is an important thing to do, right? So that's why we start with literally the foundation of the path of practice. So it's before your first step. Having a guru is important, or recognizing the benefits of a guru. So the actual way to rely on a spiritual teacher has 6 points. First, understanding the characteristics of one who is to be relied upon, which is to say that what are the characteristics of a virtuous spiritual friend? Then, what are the characteristics of the student who does the relying? 3, the way the student relies on the spiritual friend. 4, what are the benefits of reliance? 5, the drawbacks of not relying. And 6, a summary of all these points. So 1, what are the characteristics of the one to be relied upon? The virtuous spiritual friend. So the word geshe means virtuous spiritual friend. Gewe Shenyin. So the Gelug's have adopted that term as our title, but it means a virtuous friend or virtuous spiritual friend, which is why when we talk, you'll see other Kadampa, we call them Kadampa Geshes, right? We say that these are the direct students of Atisha. The Kadampa lineage masters are often called the Kadampa Geshes. But the Geshe title, that we understand it, didn't exist until the 15th century, so 500 years after they met. But the term Geshe means a virtuous friend or a virtuous spiritual friend. So that is what that term means. And we just kind of appropriated it for ourselves, those of us that study at the 3 great seats. So when we say relying on a guru, we should understand what that means is a virtuous spiritual friend, right? Although generally speaking, in terms of the individual vehicles, right, that is to say the Shravaka vehicle, or even we can just say the Hinayana vehicle and Mahayana vehicle, a lot is said about this in the scriptures, along with their commentaries. Here, only the virtuous spiritual friend who guides students on the path to Buddhahood, the Mahayana vehicle, by gradually guiding them on the path to the 3 types of beings, will be presented. So in the teachings, there are different commentaries on how to rely upon a guru depending on what path you're practicing. So a Hinayana guru and the Shravaka guru or Pratika guru and so forth, there are different teachings describing all of them, right? But Tsongkhapa here is only going to talk about a Mahayana guru. There is a little bit, right? So what we talked about in general, I don't know if we'd say the difference between the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha, but we generally say that we have, first off, we have spiritual, again, the language is a little bit difficult in English, but we say there are spiritual instructors and spiritual friends, first off, right? So spiritual instructors are anyone that is giving some explanation of Dharma, but it doesn't mean they're actually a teacher, or a quote-unquote teacher, right? A guru of any sort. So there's a spiritual instructor and then a spiritual friend. Those are 2 different types of relationships you can have. And those are both explained differently. And then spiritual friend, we generally say there are 3 types. There is the one that is with the pratimoksha spiritual friend. So they're a spiritual friend that is teaching you all the vows and the Vinaya. For a layperson, that means teaching you how to giving you your vows, your layperson vows at least, and then also teaching about all of the teachings that are related to that. So that is like a Hinayana spiritual friend. So the way that is taught is one way, and the contours of that relationship is one thing. And then there's the Mahayana spiritual friend, and then there's the tantric spiritual friend, right? And we often conflate Mahayana and tantric spiritual friend. So he does that here in his text, The Fulfillment of All Hopes. He doesn't. He's very clear about the distinction. And for our purposes, the distinction is there are many distinctions. There are numerous distinctions. The most important one is when someone is a tantric guru, you have to see them as a Buddha, right? They are a living Buddha. Everything they say is the perfect teaching of Buddha. They have no faults. They might display faults, but they don't have any faults. They are a Buddha. A Mahayana spiritual friend, we're advised to have that same discrimination is important and helpful, but it's not necessary. Someone can be a Mahayana spiritual friend all the way up to giving you bodhisattva vows and teaching you all of the elements of Mahayana other than Tantra. And you don't have to see them as a Buddha, but you see them as a representative of the Buddhas, right? So there's a slight difference there. You still see their teachings as the words of the Buddha, but you don't see them as a living Buddha. You see them and understand them to be a representative of the Buddhas. So that's what's expected of a Mahayana spiritual friend. But our teachers, like Lama Capital Lama Rinpoche, says that anyone that taught you a single letter of the alphabet, you should see as a Buddha. Because it's and especially in the Tibetan context, you only learn to read if you're going to become a monk or a nun, right? So by learning to read, that meant you were learning how to study the Dharma. So anyone that taught you a single letter, it was for the purpose of becoming a Buddha. Therefore, they should be seen as a Buddha to you. So the way our lineage teaches us, and the way Tsongkhapa kind of explains it here, is we should see all of our Mahayana spiritual friends as Buddhas. But when you get into the nitty-gritty, there actually is a distinction between the Pratimoksha spiritual friend, Mahayana spiritual friend, and a Tantric spiritual friend. Okay? So that's a little bit of distinction. But here, he's going to be talking about the last two kind of combined. You'll see he quotes the 50 verses on Guru devotion, which is specifically talking about a Tantric guru, right? That's one of his source texts that he quotes here. But these characteristics that we're going to talk about, that's the first part, go for all of your spiritual friends. What are the characteristics that a spiritual friend should embody? So in the ornament, so this has 3 points: the highest characteristics, the middling, and the least. So what is the ideal situation, the middling situation, and the least situation? So the ideal situation, the highest group of characteristics. In the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras by Maitreya, right? The Mahayana Sutra Alankara, it says that students need to rely on a spiritual teacher who is endowed with 10 qualities or 10 properties. And the verse says, a spiritual teacher with discipline, with calm, with complete peace, with more qualities, with effort, with richness in scripture, who has thoroughly realized suchness, who is eloquent, who is loving, who is never disheartened, on that one you should rely. So that verse teaches us the 10 qualities we should seek out in a spiritual friend. And of those 10, there are 6 that are considered random, right? The qualities the teacher has for themselves, and then 4 qualities about how they relate to others. So all that is going to be explained as we continue. So I won't go into it now. We'll go through them. Tsongkhapa goes through them. So the first quality, disciplined, right? Furthermore, it says that someone who has not disciplined himself is consequently not in a position to discipline someone else. A spiritual master disciplining others has to be someone who has first disciplined his own mind. You may wonder, well then, in what way does it require disciplining? To accomplish whatever occurs to you and then label it a quality of realization because it exists in the mind is of no benefit. This is why a system of mental discipline compatible with the general teachings of the victors is necessary. That has been ascertained as the 3 precious trainings, and therefore the 3, ethics and so on, have been set forth. In this regard, discipline refers to training in ethics. Okay, so when you say a teacher has to be disciplined, it means that their mind has to be tamed, and they have to understand what it means to live in morality, right? So that means both the morality, the Vinaya, the Pratimoksha morality, the Bodhisattva morality, and the Tantric morality. A teacher should understand all of those, especially depending on what they're teaching, right? So that's what it means to have a disciplined mind. You know, in Tibetan, the word for a student that we often use is one who is to be disciplined. A duja. Someone who is going to be disciplined is a student. Right? So that's the first quality a teacher has to have, is discipline. That means mental discipline. Then it means living in morality. In the Sutra on the Vows of Individual Liberation, it says, in accord with the unruly horse of the mind, always willfully straying away, a bridle studded with 100 sharp nails, that's individual liberation. Someone skilled at breaking wild horses tames them by means of a good bridle. The sense powers pursue wrong objects like wild horses. Ethics subjugates them as one engages in inappropriate activities and makes one engage with much effort in what ought to be done. Someone trained in it has likewise tamed the horse of the mind. Right? So this is saying, and what it mentions before is, just because whenever you accomplish something, if you label that a realization, that does not mean you're disciplined, right? If you just have some insight and you say, oh, this is a realization, then that doesn't mean a disciplined mind. Discipline means not only living in the pratimoksha vows, which is what's most important, but it also means recognizing how to distinguish dharma from non-dharma, right? So just labeling something as being a realization, as being, I might be an excellent singer, and to say that is an excellent quality of a teacher, look how good of a singer I am, that's not useful. Maybe true or not, it's not, but it may be true, but that is nothing to do with the Dharma. So discipline is what is, from the point of view of the teacher, living in morality, being able to distinguish what is Dharma and what is not, and living in the Dharma, right? So here we're talking specifically about the Pratimoksha vows. That's why they quote the Pratimoksha Sutra. So for a monk, that is the vows of a monk. For a layperson, it's the 5 vows. We think of our pratimoksha vows as our external vows, right? So they're incredibly important. If we say we have the 3 vows, the tantric vows are secret vows. They should guide all of our mind and all of our practice, but they're secret. And the way we practice it is secret. The bodhisattva vows are our internal vows, right? So they should guide all of our activities, but they aren't something we wear on our sleeve. They motivate us, but they are still internal. And then our external vows are our pratimoksha vows. So our external, our secret, our external, internal, and secret behavior, our external, internal, and secret vows in all that way. Which means the pratimoksha vows, sometimes people dismiss them, right? They say they're not important. It's more important. I've taken bodhisattva vows. I've taken tantra vows. Pratimoksha vows, those are for beginners only. No. Those are the foundation. Those are the most important. Because without those, you can't have the elements, right? And so we wear them. And here, the analogy is like a bridle, which is, I understand it and I appreciate it. I don't always think of it that way. So here it's saying when your mind is wild, the point of the vows, it's the 100 sharp nails that I don't like. That doesn't appeal to me. But the point of it is that when your mind is wild, you need to tame it, right? And so the point of having vows, point of living in morality, is not to is not to stop you from doing the things that you want to do, right? It's not to make you a downer. The point of having vows and living in morality is to make your life meaningful and to make you avoid non-virtue, right? The point of having vows is to liberate. I often talk about newly ordained monks and nuns. When you become a monk or a nun and you have the novice vows, those are 36 vows. If you look at the 36 vows of a novice and you think of them as a burden, you're not going to stay ordained very, right? If you look at the 5 vows of a layperson and you say these are a burden, you're not going to hold them very long. The point of the vows is to free us. It's to help us guide our mind towards liberation, right? Which is why if you think of the vows as chains holding you down, it's not going to help. Which is why I don't really like the imagery of the 100 sharp nails. But the point is the same, right? The whole point of the vows is to tame our mind. So here it talks about the mind as a wild horse. We also talk about the mind as a wild elephant and a wild monkey. We have lots of different animal metaphors for the mind, depending on what the mind is doing at the time. Here, the mind is running out of control. That's why it's a wild horse. When we talk about how destructive the mind is, if it's untamed, especially a mind of self-cherishing and anger, then it's a wild elephant. When we're trying to meditate and keep our mind still, then it's a wild monkey because it's going from tree to tree to tree and not sitting still. So while it's funny to look at all these different animal metaphors, they also are helpful because we can see these different characteristics of our mind, right? So,
Venerable,
yes.
when you say the secret tantric vows, what is the secrecy about? I mean, the secrecy of tantric vows. What are the secret vows? Why are they secret?
So in general, Tantra is considered, the question is, why is it called the secret vows, or what's the secret of it when we're talking about the tantric vows? And so the tantra vehicle is often called the secret vehicle. And the reason is we practice tantra in secret. We practice, and to say we talk about tantra with students, with disciples at Dharma centers, but your tantra practice is not something that you outwardly display, right? And tantric images, tantric ideas, the way they appear and the way they're understood are not the same. So if a non-tantra practitioner were to look at some of these tantric images, you wouldn't understand them because they require explanation, right? And even the ones that are very clear to understand, they still require insight and understanding, which is why we don't just receive tantric initiation, we receive commentary and explanation on how to engage in that practice. So the reason it's considered secret is because in order to practice it appropriately, you have to be given guidance by a teacher, and it isn't the kind of thing that you do out in public. It is the core of your practice, right? It is the heart of your practice, but it's not the part of your practice that you display to others, right? So you don't wear it externally. So that's what we mean by secret. Not that it's shameful, not that it's something that has to be hidden, not that it's something you have to lie about. No, it is the heart of our practice. For those who engage for Tibetan Buddhism in general, we say the tantric practice can propel you to Buddhahood in one lifetime. It's incredibly important, right? And all of our teachers are tantric masters, and they explain the tantric teachings quite beautifully. It's considered a secret practice because it is the most internal of our practices. And then we can think of that outside of that is the Bodhisattva practice, and outside of that is our Pratimoksha practice. So the levels of visibility and the way we carry ourselves in the world is like that. We don't carry ourselves in the world like crazy tantrikas, who would like go around naked and like Tilopa, like eating fish out of a river raw, right? That's not what we do. In His Holiness Dalai Lama has said that in the 21st century, it is not an appropriate way to behaving in that kind of wild, crazy way. When we talk about tantric teachers, and especially even guru devotion, we talk about Tilopa and Naropa is often taught about proper guru devotion. Naropa had perfect guru devotion to his teacher Tilopa, who put him through all these difficult trials. He made him do all these crazy things. He made him go like kidnap a bride, right, in the middle of her bridal ceremony. But he did it without questioning his teacher, right? And then he was beaten up almost to death by the bridal party. And then Tilopa came and like waved his hand and like brought him back to life or something like this, right? And this is taught as what kind of guru devotions are now. And it's a good example. It's good to motivate us, but it's one that says your guru should not be acting like that in the 21st century. This time and this place is not appropriate for that type of teaching, right? So the guru has all these qualities, but they're kept on the inside. And then the students see the qualities through their teaching and through their behavior and through their meditation, right? But they're not something you go wild and act crazy, right? So that's what we mean by secret in that regard.
Thank you, Venerable.
So I think it's called fulfillment of all hopes, I believe it's called. If you remind me before we leave, I can look for it. I can picture the cover of it. In English, I think it's called Fulfillment of All Hopes, commentary on the 50 verses of Guru Devotion. So Kappa is the author, and it's translated by Gareth Sparrow, I believe. I'm pretty sure. So then that's the first of the 10 qualities, discipline. Then number 2 is calm. So calm means having developed the training of meditative stabilization, in which, based on mindfulness and introspection, with regard to engaging in good and counteracting faulty behavior, the mind abides in a state of inner calm. Right? So that's very clear. Someone who has actually done the work to develop calm abiding and has actually gained the realization or worked towards the realization of calm abiding. And again, the reason for that, I think this is so important. They've achieved meditative stabilization and based on mindfulness and introspection with regard to how to act properly, what to abandon and what to adopt, right? Engaging in good and counteracting faulty behavior. What is the appropriate behavior to adopt and what is the appropriate behavior to abandon? That's just achieving calm abiding isn't useful if you don't use it for something, right? Anyone can achieve calm abiding. It's not a Buddhist realization. Non-Buddhists can achieve it quite easily. Well, easily is relative, but it's not, we don't have a toehold on it. Anyone can achieve it, but then you have to do something. So to not only have a calm mind doesn't mean, here the term calm, looking at these 10 qualities, doesn't mean a teacher has achieved calm abiding. It means they've achieved calm abiding and they use that to recognize what is appropriate behavior to adopt and appropriate behavior to discard, and therefore their mind itself is calm. And then complete peace, so that's the third one, means based on calm abiding of a serviceable mind, the training of wisdom has been developed through individual analysis of the correct meaning of reality. However, yeah, so we can stop there. So complete peace is referencing not only having calm abiding, but also having special insight into wisdom. And on one hand, that means wisdom of emptiness, but it also means worldly understanding as well. So wisdom into impermanence, wisdom into coarse selflessness, and other types of worldly wisdom as well that are developed through calm abiding and special insight. However, it is not enough merely to have developed by means of the three trainings in this manner the qualities of realization that act to tame the mind. So what are the three trainings? Very quickly. We talked about this last week. Concentration.
Feel, samadhi,
Discipline.
and pragya.
Yeah. And wisdom, right? So the higher training of concentration, of ethical discipline, and of wisdom, right? And they're called the higher trainings. Here it only says the trainings. They're actually called the higher trainings because they are combined with refuge. That's what makes them a higher training versus just a regular training. So it's not just enough to have done that, right? So it's not just enough to have tamed the mind by understanding the three trainings. As the qualities of scriptural knowledge is also needed, the text says they should be rich in scripture, meaning that the three scriptural collections and so forth have been studied extensively. According to Geshe Dromtonpa, see, we use Geshe to reference Dromtonpa, who was a layperson, right? Yeah, we give him this title, Geshe. For someone to be called the Mahayana Guru, he must generate boundless understanding when he explains and when he practices. He must show what is of benefit and direct significance in the last days of the teachings. So that's saying that not only does he have to be disciplined, he or she, not only does the teacher have to be disciplined, which is to say they have to understand what it means to live in morality and actually live in ethical discipline, they also have to have a mind that is keen to calm abiding as well as special insight, and they direct that towards what to abandon and what to adopt. And they have to have a richness of understanding of the scriptures. And the reason for that is just understanding one small thing is not enough to be a Mahayana Guru. You have to understand all the teachings and have enough to share about them. So when Dromtonpa says, be of benefit and direct significance in the last days of the teachings, that means that we say the teachings of the Buddha are on decline, right? Which is kind of the cosmological understanding. A teacher should know the appropriate way to give the teachings to the students to meet their needs. So that's going to mean they have to have an understanding of various scriptures and commentaries, but also experiential understanding to know when it's important to tell a story, when it's important to give an example, when it's important to just give the words of the teaching alone. So knowing the needs of the students and how to present the teachings in a meaningful way, as opposed to a dry way, is also required of Mahayana Guru, right? This is again, the highest form of Mahayana Guru, to have all 10 qualities, right? So it's not just having a tame mind, but also being rich in scripture. So if we look at the verse, you notice we've skipped some. We've gone to 1, 2, 3. We've skipped 4 and 5. Now, and we went to 6. That's okay. We'll get back to it. So Kappa is not commenting on doing it in order for a reason. So we'll get to the other ones. Now we're on what is the 7th quality in the verse, and that is having realized suchness. So this refers to the special training in wisdom, the realization of the selflessness of phenomena. Alternatively, it is mainly held to be manifest suchness. However, even if this is not present, it is said that this criterion is also fulfilled by realization through scripture and reasoning. So above, we said that they should have complete peace, which means wisdom, understanding, special insight, understanding the nature of reality, which includes emptiness. But here it's being repeated of how important it is. That a Mahayana Guru should have ideally a direct realization of emptiness, and if not direct realization, then an inferential understanding that is based on scripture and reasoning, right? So ideally, a Mahayana teacher should have direct realization of the nature of reality, which is to say emptiness, which is to say the selflessness of phenomena, of persons and phenomena. And if they don't have a direct realization, they should at least have an inferential understanding that comes through scripture and reasoning. So this is slightly repeating what we get in complete peace, but the reason is complete peace the characteristic of having complete peace also means having special insight into worldly wisdom as well. And this is emphasizing the importance of understanding emptiness. That being, yes. So selflessness of phenomena does not include selflessness of persons, like as a characteristic, but here it means both. And generally we say that it's easier to realize selflessness of persons than it is to realize selflessness of phenomena. They are the same level of subtlety, but one is easier to realize than the other. And so in general, if you realize selflessness of phenomena, you first realize selflessness of persons. That's generally what we understand. Direct realization, right? So when it says manifest, that's the ideal. That means they have a direct realization. If not that, then at least realization through scripture and reasoning means inferential. So this, yeah. So a manifest means they should actually be an Arya being, right? They've achieved the path of seeing. And since they're a Mahayana teacher, they should have achieved the path of seeing, minimum of the Bodhisattva path, right? But inferential means you don't have to achieve the path of seeing. You can achieve inferential before you even enter into the Bodhisattva path, right? Yeah. You don't have to. Not to meet these criteria, right? So there's different types of students, right? So when we enter into the path of Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva path, the entryway is having that actual bodhicitta, right? That unfabricated actual bodhicitta that is unending. That is what it means to be a bodhisattva, to enter into the path of accumulation. And depending on the type of student, most students actually realize emptiness before they generate actual bodhicitta. We say that is the sharp faculty student, and the dull faculty student is the one that first generates bodhicitta and then realizes emptiness. But most realize emptiness first, because there's more points you can debate about that. Most people that become bodhisattvas will have an inferential understanding of emptiness before they actually enter into the Mahayana. Not 100%, but most will, or many will. So to meet this criteria, you don't actually have to have bodhicitta. So far. That being so, even if he has scriptural knowledge and realization, it is not enough for them to be inferior or equal to those of the disciple. Therefore, someone with more qualities is needed, because in the collection of indicative verses, it says, people relying on someone inferior wither. Those relying on one of their peers stay the same. Those relying on leaders attain to sanctity. Therefore, rely on those ahead of you. Endowed with discipline, complete peace, and even more superior wisdom, if you rely on any such lords, you'll even end up ahead of Ujjamoa said, this is one of the Kadampa Geshes, as I listen to the accounts of the saints, I look up to them. And Tashi said, this isn't Tashi, again, a Kadampa, said, I take the old men of Reting as models. I think this reference is from Tongpa, but I'm not sure. Accordingly, we need someone with more qualities as a model to look up to. That being so, those 6 properties are positive qualities you yourself attain. So more qualities, right? That's the 4th one listed of in the verse. So these 6 qualities are the 6 qualities that are attained by the teacher that they should have. So this one I don't have to explain too much. Ideally, your teacher should have more good qualities than you and more understanding than you. And it says if you're relying on someone that has less than you, then your intelligence or your understanding is going to go down. Right? If they're the same as you, then you're not going to go up. And if they are more than you, that is when your intelligence grows and you will eventually can surpass them. Right? That makes sense. So these 6 are the ones that are, we'd say, ranten. They have to develop on their own. So having discipline, being calm, having complete peace, being rich in scriptures, having realized suchness, and having more qualities than the disciple. Those 6 are the one they realize on their own. The remaining 4 qualities are for taking care of others. So these are still qualities they have to generate, but it's not for their own benefit. These qualities, so the first 6 are all, we look for them in a teacher, but really those qualities benefit the teacher themselves, right? Like have a teacher having a calm mind is to benefit their mind, to benefit their practice. These next 4 are the way they benefit others, right? The sages, so the remaining ones are qualities for taking care of others. As they say, and this is a very famous important verse that comes from Sutra. The sages do not wash away evil with water. They do not remove the suffering of beings by hand. They do not graft their realizations onto others. They liberate, teaching the truth of reality's nature. As is expressed here, apart from teaching others the path in an unmistaken manner and taking care of them, nothing can be done such as washing away negativities with water. And this is because, at the time of the Buddha, the Hindu teachers, they believed that if you went to the Ganges River, you could wash away all of your impurities and sins because the river was holy, right? And I'm sure there's still belief similar to that now. So the Buddha is saying, no, I can't wash away your impurities. And for that matter, I can't give you my realizations. What I can do is teach you the path to liberation. That is what I can do. If the Buddha could give us his realizations, we wouldn't be suffering, right? If the Buddha could wash away all of our misdeeds, we wouldn't have negative karma because he'd have gotten rid of it, right? So he's saying, look, I can't do that. What I can do is I can teach you. And by teaching you, you can do the work to be liberated. And so because of that, there are these 4 characteristics that go towards how to be teaching in a beneficial way. Among the 4 characteristics that are related to this, the first, eloquent, means experience with regard to the stages of guidance and skilled at putting the meaning across to the minds of those to be tamed. So that makes sense, right? That is the 8th one that is listed in the verse, eloquent. This meaning not only understanding the material, but being able to teach it in a way that is useful to the students. And to be honest, that's why you see, maybe it's a little different now, but a lot of geshes who are the Rampa geshes, who are incredibly talented, skilled, knowledgeable, when they come to the West for the first time and they teach Westerners, or even they teach in India, but they teach to lay people for the first time, it's not well received because they're teaching the way they teach in the monastery. And that's not what other people are used to receiving, right? So they may have incredible realization, but they haven't developed the skills to teach to a different audience yet. And then you see, especially, I've seen at FPMT centers, geshes come and the first couple months, they're teaching and, there's not a lot of cohesion there. But then once they realize, oh, this is what Westerners need, and then they figure out how to adjust their teachings because they have the understanding. They just need to understand what the students need as opposed to what the monks need, right? Which is different. So you see that is something that can be learned quite quickly by the intelligent teachers. So being eloquent means that. Next one, loving means having pure motivation to teach Dharma and teaching motivated by compassion without regard for material gain or respect. So of course we say love, right, is the wish for others to be happy and have all the causes of happiness. But here, for a teacher to be loving doesn't only mean they have love for their disciples, but also have compassion for their disciples. And importantly, that it means their teachings are not motivated by the worldly dharma of wanting to have material gain or respect, right? So that's all included in this quality of being loving, not just having love for their disciples, but also having compassion and also not being motivated by their worldly concerns. We need someone like Potuva, who said to Chengala, son of Lima, however many explanations of the Dharma I have given, not once have I claimed the applause as my own. There is no migrating being that is not pitiable. So these are again 2 of the early Kadampa geshes, students of Atisha. And what he's saying here is, son of Lima. Lima is like a family name, I believe, for Chengala. It must be his lineage name. Whenever I teach, if people are happy with my teachings, I never have the mistake that they're happy with me because it's the Dharma that people are overjoyed by, right? Even if my explanation is what brought them joy or realization or happiness, it's not me. It has nothing to do with me, right? And so as a teacher, that is one of the most important things to realize. If I'm ever able to benefit anyone with my teaching, it has nothing to do with me. It all is because of the Dharma itself, right? And he says, migrating beings are, there's no migrating being, there's not pitiable. Pitiable is a really harsh word in English. It just means someone who is worthy of compassion, someone who is suffering, right? Someone who experiences suffering, and therefore they are worthy of compassion. But it sounds pretty bad in English, but to be pitiable. Then the last 2 qualities, with effort, means that the teacher constantly delights in the welfare of others. And then never disheartened means that the teacher does not become weary due to explaining things over and over again, but rather willingly bears the hardships of explaining. So with effort, right, that means that the teacher, with a joyful mind, is actually exerting themselves in their teachings. They're not just showing up right? They're doing it joyfully and they're seeking out how to explain in the most meaningful way. And they don't get tired of doing it. They don't say, oh, I'm teaching this again, or I already taught this how many times. They don't get fatigued by the act of teaching, even if they have to say the same thing over and over and over again, right? So these are the 4 qualities of the 10 that are related to how to teach others. So being eloquent, being loving, never having effort or being with effort, and never being disheartened are the 4 qualities. So together we have 10. So those are the 10 qualities that we should expect
Venerable,
in yes.
Venerable, in the 6 qualities, the first 6, the
Uh-huh.
more qualities that is said, more qualities.
Uh-huh.
It's so, how do you quantify such a thing? I mean, so and so has more than so and so, like so I
You
should
have
go
to
to that teacher because he or she has more and this teacher has less.
no. So this is saying this isn't about measuring one teacher against another. It's about measuring a teacher against you, right? And so me as a disciple, I should seek out a teacher who understands this material more than I do, who has a better Dharma practice than I do, who has higher or more realizations or understanding than I do. That's what it means by more qualities. So I shouldn't say, oh, teacher A has more loving kindness, but teacher B has more wisdom. And therefore, like, it's not about comparing one teacher to another, but comparing them to yourself. And arguably, like, there's no tally sheet. Like, I can't go look up your bio and you'd have like check marks about what you have for an understanding. But I know how well I understand something, relatively speaking. So when I hear a teacher speaking, I should make sure that they have a better understanding than me. That's what this is pointing out. And I can observe in my teachers to see the way they carry themselves, the way they talk about the Dharma, the way they live the Dharma through their everyday activities, that they have an understanding and a realization that I don't have. So we have to observe our teachers, because you can't just ask them, how much do you know about this? How does it compare to mine? Because they won't answer truthfully if you do. If you ask a teacher if they understand emptiness, very few of them are going to say yes, even though I'm confident many of my teachers have realizations of emptiness. Very few of them will be like, oh yeah, I understand emptiness. They always talk about it in a circumventing way. So it's about observing your teachers and recognizing that they understand the Dharma better than you. That is what that is pointing to.
So it's also then about assessing yourself and assessing the teacher. And that's
Yeah, of
okay.
course. Yeah.
Okay. No,
This is
assessing
when
yourself, of course, it's okay. But even assessing a teacher, if someone's a teacher, I guess, I mean, maybe at my level, I always, if so-and-so's teacher, then obviously the teacher knows more than, because by the virtue of the fact that the teacher is a teacher.
right.
This
So the
probably is
truth
for very advanced practitioners, right?
in general, it's safe and a smart decision when someone is giving a Dharma teaching, especially if they're someone. So, for instance, I'm trying to think of all the way to say this that's appropriate. So, for instance, at the FPMT, if you go to an FPMT center and there's someone teaching at an FPMT center, we're registered with the FPMT. And that just means that we've met certain criteria that the FPMT as an organization determines that we qualify to give certain levels of teaching, right? So at least when you go to an FPMT center, you can have some level of trust that the person teaching has some level of understanding. That doesn't mean you should accept everything they say blindly. It doesn't mean that just because someone says it, it must be the correct understanding of Dharma. But you can have some confidence that they know enough to be considered appropriate for teaching at a center like this, right? And other Dharma organizations, they don't always have that kind of system. But so you could, if it's a genuine or respectable organization, you should assume going in that the person teaching has some level of understanding and give them the benefit of the doubt. But giving them the benefit of the doubt isn't the same thing as accepting blindly everything they say. So before you take someone as a teacher, you definitely should investigate them. You should hear them give teachings before you accept them as a teacher, right? You should listen to them teach. You should listen to them when they're not teaching, when they're having conversations. You should observe them when they're interacting with students. You should observe them when they're eating their meals, right? Ideally, you should observe them all the time. So before you accept someone as a teacher, you definitely should investigate them. And if you observe them and you say, this person doesn't seem to know anything, then why would you accept them as a teacher, right? Or if you see them teaching one topic and they seem to teach it beautifully, but then you see them teach something else and they do it miserably, then you have to consider that, right? So it's appropriate to definitely assess in that way. Now, that isn't to say you should observe their fault and criticize them for it, or say this person is a fake teacher or like that. You just say that this person, the way they teach is not appropriate for me, or their understanding isn't the type of understanding that's useful for me as a student, right? Just because someone is sitting on a throne and talking about Dharma doesn't actually mean they're a teacher in any meaningful way, right? And we have experience in 21st century, unfortunately, and there's historical examples too of people who are considered Dharma teachers whose behavior doesn't line up with the teachings they give, right? Just because we understand the Dharma intellectually and we can quote it doesn't mean that they live the Dharma in a meaningful way. And so it's important for our teachers to live the Dharma that they teach. It's incredibly important. So if you observe someone teaching something, even if the way they teach, it seems so pristine and beautiful, but then the way they act doesn't seem to be concordant with that, then that is probably not a person who you should accept as a teacher. And you won't have that unless you observe them. So it's definitely appropriate to observe them. And then you observe your mind in relationship to them. I have a very good friend who I went to grad school with, who lived at Kopan for a while. And he's not a monk, he's never been ordained. And so he received teachings from Lama Rinpoche many years before me. And if anyone, I don't know how many people remember receiving teachings from Rinpoche before he showed the aspect of having a stroke. But for the decade or so before that, when he gave teachings in English, he'd cough quite a lot. And he'd give a teaching and he would, sometimes it'd be hard to understand him because he'd be coughing quite a lot. And my friend said, look, whenever Zopa Rinpoche walked into the room, I understood that a bodhisattva was walking through the room. Like the whole room became more powerful. However, hearing him teach, I was so aggravated by hearing his coughing. That's all I could focus on. So I could never accept him as a teacher. And it wasn't because of him, but it's because my mind wasn't appropriate to have him as a teacher. I recognized all of his good qualities. I saw him as a bodhisattva. Like there wasn't a doubt in my mind. I also knew that like I had this obstacle. And so that only came from observation, right? So you can respect someone as a teacher, as a realized being, as a holy being, and then also not be their student. So we have to find what is appropriate, right? So that's what that is pointing to, having more qualities, is recognizing the teacher has more qualities than we do. And again, there's no real way to codify it, but we observe them. And then through our observation and through our own self-observation, we try to deduce in that way.
Yes, thank you, Venerable.
Okay, continuing. So those are what is called the maximum or the best, how do they call it? The highest characteristics of a teacher. The medium characteristics. This has 2 points. Even if it is difficult, due to the times, to find someone who has the complete set of characteristics like that, it is said you should not rely on anyone whose faults are greater or whose faults and positive qualities are equal, but on someone whose positive qualities exceed their faults. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I did. That was the minimum. Let's jump back to the medium. Thank you. The middling characteristics. Kotua said, the 3 trainings, realization of suchness and a loving heart, these 5 are the main thing. My master Shang is not very learned in everything, and since he cannot bear disenchantment either, he does not impress upon his mind the kindness he receives. However, since he has the above-mentioned 5, whoever is in his presence benefits. Nientong is by no means eloquent, and each time he makes a dedication, the only thing he knows is that. Again, nobody understands anything, but since he has those 5, people near him benefit. This is really hard. So Potua, his Tibetan is like an antique style of Tibetan. It's very hard to understand. And literally, I read a number of commentaries on this text, contemporary commentaries, just because I wanted to make sure I understood this. And every single teacher was like, so Potua's Tibetan is very hard to understand. What generally this seems to mean. So in general, we understand, right? He identifies these 5. That a teacher, if they don't have the 10 qualities mentioned above, the bare 5, they should have the 3 trainings. So they should have training in wisdom, training in concentration, and training in discipline or moral ethics. They should have an understanding of emptiness, and they should have a loving heart, which is to say loving kindness and compassion. Those 5 they should have. And then his example of his own teacher, he said he's not very learned in everything. Here, when it says he can't bear disenchantment, it seems to mean that when he gets tired, he gets grumpy, essentially. Like he doesn't like being tired. And so he won't give teachings when he's like in a bad mood, it seems to me. And then he does not impress on his mind the kindness he received. It seems to me that he's not grateful when people do nice things for him, right? Regardless, his point is that from a worldly perspective, he recognizes that his teacher doesn't have all those 10 qualities, yet he has those 5 that he mentioned above. And so by having those 5, he's still benefiting, right? And then he gives another example of Gyalten, who's another teacher who isn't eloquent. So people don't necessarily understand what he says right away. His teachings, when he gives teachings, people don't get the meaning right away. Yet he has the 5 characteristics that are listed. So eventually, people still benefit from his teachings. Even if they don't benefit immediately, they're still benefiting. So this is just examples of if we have those 5 minimum, that is the middle characteristics. Instead of having all 10, if they have these 5, that's a middling characteristic. But then, as I jump to, because you can see this is the one that I, go ahead. Is there a question? They have a realization of them, an understanding of them. To perfect them means to be a Buddha, really, right? If we say, have. Well, we say the 3 trainings, all the teachings of the Buddha, are contained in the 3 trainings, right? So all of the teachings of the Buddha are split into the 3 baskets of teachings, right? The 3 Pitaka. What are the 3 Pitaka? What are the 3 Pitaka? The 3
the sutras,
the sutras,
Sutra, Vinaya,
the Vinaya,
and
wisdom, right? So the 3, all the teachings of the Buddha are split into these 3 baskets of sutra, wisdom, and discipline or Vinaya, and those relate to the 3 trainings, right? So the higher training of moral ethics relates to all the teachings on the Vinaya and discipline. The higher training of concentration is all the teachings on sutra, right? And the higher training of wisdom is all the teachings on wisdom. So the Abhidharma teachings. When we say wisdom, we mean Abhidharma here, the Abhidharma kosha, right? Cosmology and Abhidharma, greater knowledge, quote unquote. So all the teachings of the Buddha, as you say, can be contained within the 3 trainings, right? And so when here it says the teacher has the 3 trainings, it means they're well versed in all 3 of those, both in terms of having discipline, having the 3 trainings themselves, and having an understanding of all 3 types of the Buddhist teachings, right? But they haven't mastered them perfectly. You don't have to, because again, it's the middling. To master them perfectly would be to either be Arya Bodhisattva or to be a Buddha. And then the minimum characteristics. This is the one that is quite important. Even if it is difficult, due to these times, to find someone who has the complete set of 10 or the complete set of 5, then you should rely on someone whose faults are not greater than their good qualities and whose faults are not equal to their good qualities, but whose good qualities are greater than their faults, right? Whose positive qualities exceed their faults. And again, this is based on your observation, right? This is not based on hearsay. This is not based on like how big of a throne they have. It's not based on how many disciples they have. It's based on your observation of them when they give teachings and when they're not giving teachings. And if you can discern, when you observe someone, you can see the way they behave. And if they behave in a way that seems to display faults, now we don't know others' mind, right? I can't know your mind. So if you have faults, I don't really know. You may be acting in a way, though, that seems to display you have a fault, right? Such as pride, such as attachment, such as whatever fault there may be. I don't actually know if you have that. I don't know if my teachers have that, but they can display that. So as a student, you observe, and does it seem like their good qualities outweigh their faults? And if so, then they are appropriate as a teacher, meeting this minimum requirement. And the reason this is important is because in this time, in this day and age, now, note that it says due to the times, this was written 500 years ago, right? So the times are just as degenerate now as they were then. We laugh at that. It's important for me because so many teachers and so many students say like 21st century is so different. Like I can't, the teachings aren't as relevant to me now because it's a whole different time and place. And you say, no, it's still samsara. Samsara is the same. Maybe the delivery mechanism is a little different. They didn't have smartphones in Pakistan, but they still had afflicted ones, right? The teachings don't have to change. our practice changes, right? But the teachings are the same because of the disruptions of our minds are the same. So even at the time of Tsongkhapa, it was recognized that finding a teacher that had all 10 of those qualities was very difficult. Even finding a teacher that had all 5 of those qualities was difficult. So finding a teacher who was dedicated to the Mahayana path, who had more good qualities than faults, that was possible. So that is the bare minimum for someone you should accept as a teacher. Okay. Such a guru, bringing about complete liberation, is a perpetual root. So the expediency of association with the characteristics. So why should a teacher have these characteristics? Like what's the, why do we seek out a teacher who fits into one of these 3 categories? Such a guru as that brings about complete liberation. They are the perpetual root of aspiration. Therefore, those wishing to rely on a guru should be aware of them and make an effort to look for someone who possesses the characteristics. Those wishing to have students who rely on them should strive to acquire these characteristics. So what I think is important to remember about this is we may not have aspirations to be Dharma teachers, right? But we should still recognize that we should aspire to adopt all the qualities of a Dharma teacher. All those qualities we listed in the Mahayana Sutra, those 10 qualities, all of us should try to adopt those, right? Those are good qualities for all of us to adopt, even if you don't plan on being a Dharma teacher. So this is saying that when you're seeking out a teacher, you should have those 10 qualities as your guideline basis, and then recognize that since it's a degenerate time and we may not be able to find someone with all 10, so then you try to find someone with 5. And then if you can't do that, at least look for someone who is dedicated to the Mahayana path and who has more good qualities than bad qualities. And the reason for that is because that will help you as a student. To have a teacher like that is what will propel you towards Buddhahood. That teacher will help teach you the Dharma in a way that's useful for your mind. And then you yourself should try to embody those qualities as well. So I think we'll leave it there for today, but let's have time for questions, a few minutes if there are any questions.
Venerable, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So I am a 21st century beginner practitioner, and I don't have a teacher, but because I live in today's world, I have the YouTube and I have, many portals and stuff that I trust. So I go from, I flit, right? As in, if I find a teacher explaining something in a way that I understand, then I would listen to the teacher for a length of time. And and then I might listen to some other teacher. And so that's the way and of course I come to the center and everything. So that's the way that I'm sort of learning the Dharma. And so how would you put it in the context of this text that we are learning? Is it possible to put it in the context of the
Is it
text?
possible to what?
To put it in the context of the text.
So the way, as you explained, so she mentioned that she doesn't have a teacher, but thanks to YouTube and thanks to technology, she's able to receive or attend teachings from many different teachers, and she finds different teachers, both here at the center and online, that speak to her understanding. So that in that regard, you're accepting all these teachers as spiritual instructors, right? That you're not accepting them as teachers, but they're people that are explaining the Dharma to you. So it's kind of like attending a university course in that way. And it's benefit because it's giving you understanding the Dharma and it's helping you understand how to practice the Dharma. So it's definitely beneficial. What the teachings say is to go to the next step. When you have someone as a teacher, when you actually accept them as a teacher and not just an instructor, which again, I know that's like a pedantic word choice, but we can understand there's a difference in relationship there. Then it gives you a chance to go deeper into your practice because the teacher is a two-way relationship where they are modeling behavior for you, but also you are trusting them to understand what is the best instruction for you. That's part of having a relationship with the teacher. And that trust in them, that confidence in them, or that faith is a critical part to then advancing deeper into your own practice, which is why the teacher is considered the foundation of the path. Now, that is to say that you won't get huge benefit out of spiritual instructors. There's a huge amount to benefit from that. And that's a very useful way to learn the Dharma, right? We have access to more teachings than ever before. Like, we have more teachings than ever before in history. So we should make use of them. And if you find teachers that are genuine teachers, that are teaching the Dharma in a meaningful, holistic way, then you should definitely listen to them and see if they benefit your mind. You can get benefit from any teacher. Like, it's definitely possible, right? Without accepting them as a teacher. But when you accept someone as a teacher, you form a relationship that then allows them to relate to you in a more meaningful way. So in the context of this text is talking about how to find a teacher, the qualities you should search for in someone to actually develop a guru-disciple relationship, which is going to make your practice deeper and ultimately more fulfilling. However, these characteristics you should search for in anyone that you're receiving instruction from. So even if they're just an instructor, right, and you don't have the guru-disciple relationship with them, and you don't have any intention of having that, you still want someone that knows what they're talking about. You still want someone that's doing it for the right reasons. You still want someone that seems to have their life together and isn't just a wild person who happens to say pithy things once in a while, right? So these are still characteristics you should seek out in anyone that is explaining the Dharma to you. And then it's even more important if you want to develop a relationship with them as a guru and as a guru-disciple relationship. But these are characteristics that anyone explaining the Dharma should have. And so you should always seek them out. For the same reason, right? Someone that has more of these characteristics is going to be able to teach the Dharma in a way that is more meaningful to you and is allow you to practice it more immediately. And those are the reasons that we rely on teachers that display these characteristics or that embody these characteristics.
Yes, thank you.
Venerable, a technical question.
Okay.
In the Pramana Vartika, there is the mention of a teacher, that is the Shakyamuni Buddha is the teacher because he's the protector to those who wish for liberation, because he taught the uncontrived way of the Four Noble Truths. So the context of the teacher there is differing from what these texts are speaking about, isn't it?
Yes. So in the Pramana Vartika, the second chapter of the Pramana Vartika, which is what you're referencing, the whole second chapter of the Pramana Vartika is a commentary on one verse that identifies the Shakyamuni Buddha as the teacher, and then it gives these reasons. Here, the word teacher there is actually tompa, which we translate as teacher, or as instructor, or as guider, or the one who is seen, right? That's what it means to be tompa. So that is not the same context as being a spiritual friend or a guru or one you rely upon. Now, obviously, Shakyamuni Buddha is both of those things, right? He embodied all the qualities we're talking about here, but Shakyamuni Buddha can't be our guru because he's not alive right now, right? Our guru is kinder to us than Shakyamuni Buddha because our guru is giving us teachings immediately right now in our life right now. So that's why we say our guru, whoever that guru may be, is kinder to us than Shakyamuni Buddha. So in the Pramana Vartika, that's describing the qualities that identify, it's really identifying Shakyamuni as a tsema, as a pramana, right? So pramana generally means type of mind, a valid cognition, but there's also a type of person that is a pramana, and Shakyamuni Buddha is a pramana, a valid person, I guess we could say, and it's explaining the reasons for that. And so tompa there is the word that's translated as teacher. I don't know the word in Sanskrit. In Tibetan, it's tompa, and it means teacher, or one who shows the path, one who shows something or displays something. So it's a different context than what we're studying here.
Okay.
Okay. I think we'll stop there. If there's any more questions, if they're really important, you can email me or you can save them for next week. My email is gyalten@ckSL.in. That can be shared in the chat if anyone doesn't know it. I encourage you to review everything we talked about over the week. You should be able to have a PDF. If you don't have one, you can email anyone in the center. We'll send it to you. And then read maybe 10 or so pages ahead to try to prepare yourself for next week as well. Anything that you can trust, that anything that is a list of things that we talked about, I'm probably going to review you on it next week. So try to remember the lists, okay? Not just because I want you to remember them, because I want to practice them, right? Knowing the words doesn't matter. Being able to spout 100 lists doesn't matter if they don't saturate your mind in a meaningful way. But that's the first step. Knowing the words is the first step, and then understanding them is the second step. And so because of that, it's the same thing with our prayers. The same reason we recite prayers isn't just to get the merit of reciting prayers. There is merit from just saying the words of prayers. But if they don't saturate your mind, then that merit is very slim. So we want to have first the merit of recitation, but then the merit of understanding them, because that's what transforms us. That is how the Dharma transforms us, is by trying to bring it into our minds and then into our everyday practice. So I encourage you to review and study over the week, and we will happily continue this next Saturday. I think right now the plan is to be online. There's some debate about whether I'm going to come in person, because next Sunday is Sakadao Dushan, the 15th of Sakadao, which is the celebration of the Buddha's birth, achieving enlightenment, and showing the aspect of passing into Nirvana. The Tibetans understand all three to happen on the same day, which is the 15th day of the 4th lunar month. That happens to be next Sunday. So there'll be special events here at the center, but we're not quite sure what they're going to be yet, and we're not quite sure if I'm going to be here or not. So those of you who come here in person, keep your eyes open to see if we're going to be hybrid or not next Saturday. Because if I'm coming for Sunday, I'll be here for Saturday as well. So we don't know, but they'll definitely be online no matter what. So those that are online will definitely be here next Saturday. And with that, so after next Saturday, I think there'll be one more teaching. So we have to look at the schedule. There's a big teaching happening at Saraja Monastery from Lamrim. And so because of that, I won't be able to leave the monastery for a few weeks. I think our Saturday teachings won't be affected, because I think those teachings will be in the morning, but they'll all be online for the month of June. The Sunday teachings might be affected. However, Venerable Namjung is going to be visiting Sarah to attend these teachings. And so the weekend before Gyalten's teachings and the weekend after, he's going to be here at the center doing a 4-part teaching on the Vajrayana Sutra. Those days are confirmed. I don't remember what they are. So Deepti will announce them. So Venerable Namjung will be here for 2 weekends. And then in between that, we'll continue our Saturday classes online. But next week, I don't know. It's definitely online, maybe in person, and the week after that is up in the air. So I'm sorry, we're trying to align things with Sarah J's schedule. It gets a little complicated, so just keep a check on the email and on the WhatsApp, and we'll make sure everyone's up to date. Okay, let's end with dedication prayers. I know I've kept you a little long already, so we won't do the extensive prayers. So in the Gold Book on page 235, we will recite, right, on these ones we have on screen. Yeah, samples. Okay, great. We'll recite these first 5 verses in English. So in general, dedication is, we recognize that through our practice today together, we've accumulated some merit, some good karma. And instead of wishing for that karma to benefit us alone, we wish that we could give that merit away, that karma would ripen on other sentient beings, that it would eliminate other beings' suffering, that it would be dedicated to the continued display of a long life for all of our teachers, that for all those who have died, they may quickly take a perfect human rebirth and meet a Mahayana virtuous friend, that all those who are suffering in body and mind may be freed from their anguish, and that we ourselves may quickly become Buddhas so that we may be of maximum benefit to other sentient beings. So we dedicate away our merit in those ways, excuse me. And with that, we'll offer these verses of dedication. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by the victorious ones thus gone of the 3 times, so I might perform good works. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of perfect pure Losam Drakpa to shine forever. And then we'll go to page 273 and offer the short online prayer correspondence. these two verses and the two verses on the next page as well. In the land encircled by snow mountains, where the source of all happiness and good, all-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion. To the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be fulfilled. In short, may the good fruit of any extensive prayer to fully protect in the land of snows made by the powerful protector Chenrezig and the presence of the Buddhas and their children appear soon here and now. May the nectar stream of the blessings of the lotus holder always enter our hearts and nourish them with strength. May we please you with offerings and dedicated practice, and may we reach beyond the shores of perfect compassionate deeds. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me in person and online today. I appreciate all of you, and I look forward to continuing teachings next week. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
very
much.
much. Thank you, everyone.